So my name is Furqan Nazeeri. I'm a partner at a firm called ExtensionEngine, and I've been with the company for about 10 years. I've actually been involved in Open edX since it was open sourced, actually since before it was open sourced in 2013. In my role at ExtensionEngine, I'm responsible for setting client expectations, for overseeing the delivery teams, and ultimately for client success. I should point out that I'm not a software engineer, so actually I'm curious, is anybody in here a software engineer? All right, so you guys can ask questions. This particular project, actually most of our projects at ExtensionEngine are innovative. They tend to be kind of the first time a university or institution has done something. This particular one is on what I call the frontier of innovation in online learning, in that it is, I believe, the first time that a university has offered an online degree that's fully delivered on Open edX. And so we went through a lot, as you'll see in this talk, to deliver on that. I've got about 25 minutes of remarks, and then we'll have some questions, except for from you two guys. Actually, out of curiosity, before I talk about this, one thing is, has anyone ever taken an online degree? Or did everyone here go to school in a residential campus? All right. Has anyone ever enrolled in an online class other than in a MOOC? So like an actual 4-credit online class? All right. Generally speaking, online courses are offered in Sakai, Blackboard, Moodle. Sometimes they're in Canvas, but it's generally a very different experience than what you've experienced if you're in a MOOC like Open edX or Coursera. Let me quickly get the advertisement out of the way. So ExtensionEngine creates custom learning experiences, everything from strategy to instructional design. We do software development, customizations, we do hosting and support, and we even do learner acquisition, which is actually doing the digital marketing to acquire students for an online program. We help organizations develop kind of best-in-class online learning by blending courses and platform into something that's really unique. And we focus on projects where the problem is really hard, the pedagogy is important, and the program is strategic to the organization. We've also got deep expertise in Open edX. I think we've completed 30-odd Open edX projects over the last couple of years. And so I'm going to talk about one of those today. Before we jump into that, this is actually a process we do at ExtensionEngine where we talk about the target learner, we talk about learning objectives, pedagogy, and then the program. So I guess for this talk, the target learner. You'll find this really interesting if one or more of these describes you. Number one is you're planning to offer an online degree program and haven't selected a platform. Number two is actually probably most relevant here, which is you have Open edX as a supported platform for MOOCs or maybe for flipped classroom, like supporting a residential class, but you're looking for additional use cases. And most people rule out a full credit degree course as a use case, but I'm here to tell you that that actually is a viable opportunity for Open edX. The third one is you like Open edX, but there is a gap between what it does out of the box and your requirements. And so we'll talk about how to close those gaps. In terms of the learning objectives, after this talk, I'm hoping that you'll be able to have an understanding of the reasons why you might want to use Open edX for an online degree program. I'll show you an example of how we did that at Notre Dame, and you'll get a sense of what it's like to create a unified custom learning experience that wraps actually Open edX with many other tools. And finally, I want to share some lessons learned from that experience so that hopefully you can avoid some of the mistakes that we made should you decide to pursue this strategy for your institution. And there'll be time for some questions at the end. So I'll start with actually a little bit of background on the project. I think it's important to understand the context, the people for that matter, before jumping into the project specifics, which I will get into. Um, Actually, Notre Dame, who's heard of Notre Dame? Anyone heard of Notre Dame? All right. Well, for those of you who haven't, the University of Notre Dame is a private Catholic research university located in Indiana, which is in the Midwestern part of the U.S. The school was founded in 1842, which makes it brand new by Spanish standards. It is, however, one of our oldest institutions. It currently teaches about 12,000 graduate and undergraduate students across 8 different colleges. Notre Dame is considered an elite institution in the U.S. I think it's ranked number 15 by U.S. News and World Reports as an undergraduate program. It has many of its individual degrees and master degrees are in the top 5, top 10. About 20% of the students that apply to the program are admitted, so it's highly selective. And its endowment is more than 10 billion US dollars. I know this sounds crazy here in Europe, but undergraduate tuition at Notre Dame costs $50,000 per year. In 2014, Notre Dame joined edX as its 35th charter member and has since produced about 10 MOOCs that have run on edX quite successfully. So it's with this in mind that Notre Dame decided to launch a new degree program. And the thing to bear in mind is very few of the elite institutions in the US offer fully online degrees. And there's a lot of reasons that they don't, and a lot of obstacles, I should say, that they have to overcome in order to do that. And Notre Dame is very much in this, where they had to successfully overcome these obstacles and to really convey the institutional history, the institutional culture in the program. In terms of the degree, it's actually an online master's degree in data science. This is actually a summary of the actual mission statement that we wrote down in the very first meetings with Notre Dame. And I think it encapsulates what we plan to do and actually have done with the program. It frames the opportunity first as there being more data created in the past 3 years than in all of prior human history. The vision for the program is to foster analytical precision and creative problem solving with an emphasis on applied projects and case studies. So it really drove the pedagogy by having small cohorts doing case-based project work. The program characteristics is the key point to emphasize on this slide. Notre Dame wanted to use digital to improve the student learning outcomes and not just to expand market reach or to experiment with online. And this is the feature that really drove the custom platform, is we needed to apply the institutional background, the pedagogical requirements, and to create that custom learning experience that the student have, which the goal was and is to drive better outcomes. And lastly, the graduates should be T-shaped with a strong computational and quantitative background. At Notre Dame, there's a chief academic digital officer, tenured professor by the name of Elliot Visconti. In addition to this role, Elliot is also a professor in English literature, as well as an associate professor in the law school. In addition to his academic responsibilities, he has been a founder of a software-based commercial venture. And I actually looked up and I read his bio, and it actually says here, in his capacity as Chief Academic Digital Officer, Elliot works at the nexus of strategy, fundraising, faculty development, curriculum policy, intellectual property, financial modeling, and pedagogy on a variety of university-wide programs. So when I first met Elliot, I thought, geez, this is a really odd background, right, for somebody who's leading the charge on the first online degree program at a university. But after working with him and his team, I found that it's exactly the depth and breadth of experience that's required to drive real innovation in academia. And looking back, I can say that Elliot was the perfect visionary to conceive launch and overcome all the obstacles that we found in our way in launching this program. A little bit more about the program. So as I mentioned, it's the first fully online master's degree for Notre Dame. I also believe this is the first fully online degree program that's been offered on Open edX. Okay, no, has anyone heard of another one? Because I haven't. We've actually asked around, so I'd be curious if that if someone does. The program is also important that it reflect the values and brand, for that matter, as well as the tradition. It can't feel generic. Initially, the program is focusing on a small cohort of students. Unlike a traditional OPM vendor, the online program management, where scale is both the means and the end, here the focus is on quality first, and then after achieving that scale. And lastly, this is an important part of it, Notre Dame is collaborating with AT&T in a very deep way. Things like employees of AT&T are enrolled in the program. There are numerous case studies and data sets that provided in partnership with AT&T. And of course, AT&T is helping fund the development of the program. In terms of the curriculum, there are 13 online courses delivered over 21 months. The curriculum is designed for mid-career professionals. So it actually starts out the first semester is half-time. At kickoff, the students come together on the Notre Dame campus. And there are actually two separate immersion programs, experiences in the middle of the program. And during the development of the course platform as well as the material, there's a tremendous amount of faculty and peer interaction. In fact, I think, worked with more than a dozen faculty. So how did Notre Dame come to the decision to develop an online program using Open edX? The first is that they had chosen data science as the program, but it turns out while the data science is new, it's incredibly competitive landscape. There are more than 20, I think it's now 30 online only degrees that you can get from actually very esteemed institutions, including like Berkeley and others. There are, I think, multiple of that are offering residential data science programs. And because of the historical stuff that I mentioned and this competitive landscape, it was incredibly important that the platform and the experience be differentiated. Someone mentioned to me that a platform demo for an online course is the new campus tour that students use to select between going to this university or that university. The other thing that was really important is Notre Dame, because they were a charter member of edX, they developed MOOCs, they had hired staff on campus, instructional designers, video production, and others to produce online courses, and they wanted to use those resources as part of this online program, so they didn't want to completely outsource it. They also wanted to take advantage of the resources of AT&T in that partnership, so it was important that be included. And most importantly, Notre Dame wanted to retain academic control over the entire process. And so as a result, the decision was to do a custom learning experience, and that drove a lot of key functionality. This is the last piece of background. So the key functionality or requirements for the program, so it's two buckets. On the left are the things that you would generally require of an online degree program. And then on the right, there are some things that were unique to Notre Dame and specifically to this particular data science program. And I think if you look at it, the list on the left is kind of what you'd expect, right? There's synchronous and asynchronous learning. You have formative and summative testing, lots of calendaring integration, lots of SIS integration. And on the right, I think there are a couple of surprises. First and foremost was an outstanding and consistent learner and instructor experience. As you'd expect, there are lots of programming tools We wanted to have an auto grading feature, so we would reduce the amount of time required for grading by faculty and TAs. And then, as you'll see in a moment, there was a tremendous amount of integration points, both with on-campus systems, but also with third-party systems. So that was a long wind-up to sort of describing like how we came to this solution and why that solution is what it is. The platform is a combination of OpenEdX, a custom application, and a bunch of third-party systems that are integrated together and combined. We call it Nexus. The project scope, so it had 3 work streams. The first one is the technology platform, Nexus. The second one was the design and production of 13 courses that comprise the program, as well as 2 zero-credit, like edumercial marketing things that we did, one of which ran on edX.org. And the third one was digital marketing and enrollment and student services to launch the program. In terms of schedule, the project took less than a year from starting to the first students being enrolled in the classes. It costs much less, about a third, about 25 to 30% of the cost of a traditional OPM arrangement with revenue sharing. And it involved a tremendous amount of folks. I think I mentioned earlier, 14 faculty from 3 different colleges were involved in the development of the program. Now, if you remember back to those requirements that we had, a lot of that, if you're familiar with OpenEdX, it doesn't sound like OpenEdX, right? Like synchronous learning, all those gradebook features that we mentioned, the programming tools, calendaring, SIS integration. So, so theoretically, I think Notre Dame could have chosen between any existing LMS like Blackboard, Canvas, Sakai, and others. But in reality, there were only 2 options that were heavily considered. The first one was Sakai, which is the LMS that's used for the residential programs at Notre Dame. And the second was OpenEdX, which Notre Dame was familiar with being a charter member of the edX consortium. Ultimately, OpenEdX was selected as the best starting point for a lot of the user experience and the student experience piece of things. And what we ended up having to do with the custom app and with the third-party solutions with Nexus is we essentially extended the OpenEdX platform using a lot of LTI integrations, and then we added a bunch of third-party applications which are sort of wrapped in a custom application, and together that comprises the student experience for the platform. So this diagram shows kind of the super high level architecture of how things are set up. So on the left is the custom application. We call it the learner dashboard, and it has about a bunch of different third-party integrations that I'll talk about in a minute. On the right is OpenEdX, and that has another half dozen third-party product integrations. And in the courses, the 13 courses, they actually sit on top of this combined platform, and that constitutes what the learner experience is. So if we just kind of go around it, starting on the left, so CAS, Shibboleth, that's the authentication system that's used, and I'll actually talk a little more deeply about this in a minute because the learner gets set up with a network ID, which provides full access to the tools and courses in which they're enrolled. edX is used as the identity provider for both the LMS and the learner dashboard, and this in turn provides the learner with federated authentication into the courses and tools which they're authorized for. And this is actually a huge piece of it, because you can see there's more than like a dozen different tools, and if a student had to manage their own authentication with all these tools, it would turn into a nightmare. So that's a key part of the platform fundamentally enabling is the user authentication. The next one on the list is Mattermost. Anyone familiar with Mattermost? So it's a open sourced cross-platform enterprise communication solution. Best way to think about it is an open source version of Slack. So it has channels and discussions, and we use that for all of the student collaboration aspects of the platform. We actually did leave on the discussion threads within edX, although those are kind of discouraged, and we're trying to drive folks into Mattermost for most of the discussions. Next one is Zoom. It's a video conferencing tool that Notre Dame actually had in place, and they use that with all their students for all their classes. Sometimes they do flipped classrooms. So every student already has a Zoom ID, and it's already federated into their Notre Dame credentials. And so we wanted to integrate that within the platform. And it's actually a really great tool for doing live video. It's super simple, and students never get lost in it. The third one here that I'll talk about is Digi or Digication. And this is actually a super cool tool. I think it should be part of every degree program, whether it's online or offline. And what it is an e-portfolio. So as the students go through the course material, they have an opportunity to take pieces of their course material and to add that to Digi, and it creates a clickable resume. So you can like double click down. So if it says, I have skills using R, you can actually double click, go into Digication, and a student can show to a future employer like projects that they actually did using R. So you get more than just like your transcript that says, I took analytics course at Notre Dame and I got a B. You actually have examples of work that you've done that is portable with you beyond your graduation. They also, the platform also integrates Google Calendar, which is used for scheduling of all the events and event management, and the entire Google suite. So all the Docs, Drive, and all those tools are integrated as part of the dashboard. On the right, we had to add a bunch of things to edX. The first one that probably really important in this is proctoring. So we used a tool called ProctorTrack by Verificient. It's one of the only automated remote proctoring solution that continuously verifies the identity of online test takers while detecting and entering academic misconduct. We integrated that using LTI. We use RStudio, which is a free open source development environment built to make using R efficient and effective. R is the main programming language that's used in the data science program, and this is a required tool for the program. And Vocarium actually has a LTI integration. It's also used in the edX. Jupyter Notebook is a web application that allows you to create and share documents that contain live code, equations, visualizations, and explanatory text. It's also part of the Vocarium LTI integration. Qualtrics, which is a really cool survey and polling tool that Notre Dame actually uses throughout the organization. So we actually used the really robust Qualtrics API to connect that into the platform. And then Vocarium, there are a lot of group-based projects within the platform, and so within the degree, and so we used the Vocarium toolset for easy deployment, peer review, and team projects. And then the last tool on here, I think, is DataCamp, and this is actually a supplemental tool, so it's not for grading. It's not a graded tool. So I think this one is currently with the direct link out, but plans to have LTI integration later. And this is for students that need some brush up on Python and other tools that are used in the class. I mentioned this, but a really important part was students go through the CAS system, which is used to authenticate their identity. That gets them into the student dashboard, and then from the student dashboard, you can link away to any of these tools, including edX that we mentioned. The student the learner dashboard piece of the platform this is a screenshot here with some things highlighted. There are a number of key use cases that we focused on this. By far, the most important use case was to view the timeline of upcoming events and then provide one-click access via an API to assignments, exams, synchronous sessions, anything that the student is supposed to do is put front and center on this, and it's sort of a Facebook style stream of events and comments and other things that the student has access to. There's also a calendar view, and then the second key use case was posting, viewing, and reading articles that both students as well as faculty could post. Faculty could actually pin, and TAs can pin certain posts and their responses to them. The third key use case was chat. Student peers and faculty. It also includes their status, whether they're online or offline. And then the fourth key use case is actually having a toolbar. Because there's so many tools that are used within the program, having a single toolbar, which is the place to go. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is this idea of plugging in third-party tools. And this is the suite that we have at the get-go. But the idea is that over the 5-7 year lifetime of this program and platform, that these tools are going to change. So this is a great place where we can have that single dashboard for it. And the last thing is analytics. So each student has kind of an analytics view, and the faculty do as well. We designed it for mobile. So the mobile use case is actually just a subset of the full dashboard. So it's the timeline is the critical one, chat, and the articles is the key thing there. In terms of Open edX, the theme we changed, obviously, to look like Notre Dame. We got rid of the horizontal nav bar, which I don't know why it exists, and so it's now embedded in the left, so you have primary, secondary, and tertiary nav. And then we created one really cool X block. We call it nested X blocks, so it's basically an X block you can put in, and then you can put in additional X blocks within that and drag and drop them around, so it's a really cool way to control how the content is presented to the learner in a way that is really readable and easy to digest. And then actually the heaviest customizations we did to Open edX were around the grade book. So we had to do things like add manual grading for discussions, participation, extra credit. There's group projects, so we had to be able to upload from Vocarium like the group projects, like which students are on which projects to do the grading. And you have to remember with edX.org, like grading is not a really heavily focused on thing, but here, grading is hugely important. So we had to allow a lot of things that didn't make sense in the MOOC. We had to change. So for example, we had to create grades so that students could look at them relative to current points instead of summative points, because otherwise it looks like you're failing the exam until you get to the very end. We had to look at it, we created a special view so you could look at your grade by points or by percents. We created some custom data exports so you could get the grades out of Open edX into Banner, which is the SIS system. And my favorite one is we had to add a feature where you could include entries in the gradebook to hundredths place. So let me finish with some lessons learned. Probably the biggest lesson learned, which I actually didn't put on here, is that this is Notre Dame's first fully online degree program. So a big part of it was learning and teaching Notre Dame faculty about how to actually do an online degree. On this list, Pedagogy First, I think, is an interesting one. Most online degree programs, they pick an LMS and then they pour all their content into it, and you kind of get the best you can. Here we took an approach of defining what we wanted to do, the pedagogy, target learner, and then making the system do that. And I think we proved that that works. We also didn't fall into the trap, which I know we at ExtensionEngine have done before, of trying to do everything with Open edX. So we let Open edX do the things that it's really good at, And then we added, third-party tools and a custom app to do the things that were best not done there. I couldn't underestimate like the people side of it and having like a real strong visionary who can overcome hurdles at the institution. This idea of experimenting, I think, is really important. So having tools, trying approaches and iterating and then changing them is a key part of this platform. And the last thing I'd say is testing early and testing often is absolutely critical. I can't, even describing like the amount of effort we had to go through to get test users for the system, to test all these different systems fully up from front to back is really important. And, we allowed, I think, 3 months to get test users, and we should have allowed more. The platform is obviously open source around the Open edX stuff. The Notre Dame currently owns the aspect of it that's custom, but they're actually open to sharing that with a small number of partners. So if anybody's actually interested in that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or direct you to Elliot if that's of interest to anybody. And I do have some time for questions if anybody's interested in that. And if nobody has any questions, I will go cold call my 2 software engineers who I know have lots of questions that I can't answer. Yes.
First of all, Furqan, that was brilliant, and congratulations to you and team. That was really good to see just how many things you can integrate, and not only that, just where you were able to also take the edX side of things as well. I'm just curious, if you had to do the project all over again, what would you do differently?
I think actually it's a really interesting piece of it because one of the things that we really pushed, and actually Notre Dame was hugely behind this, was learner experience first. And everything started with the learner experience, learning objectives, learning outcomes. How do we get students through this material in the most efficient way with mastery? And then how do we make things like the digication, right, where that's value to the student, right? Like the university doesn't get any value out of it, the faculty don't get any value out of it. That's something where I'm, as a student, building this portfolio, and I can go get a job based off of that more easily. So we came in this super heavy with a focus on the learner experience. And it was kind of interesting because towards the students are being enrolled this fall. So we're like in the last final steps of it. And so we started to involve like TAs and faculty on sort of the operational side of things. And it turns out, and it's totally backwards in how institutions normally do this. They normally start with faculty first, like how to minimize time to produce a course and optimize the faculty time, and then the student gets what they get. But we've kind of flipped that around, and I think we were super successful. In some ways, I think we were almost too successful. And if I could go back, I would have, like for example, like a last thing we were working on, or last month was creating like a faculty dashboard for curating like the discussion forums. Like, we just thought, oh, hey, they'll just be in like another student. And we're like, no, they want to add like curation and pin things and stuff like that. So I think probably what people normally do, we didn't do as much of around the faculty experience. I think actually in terms of the platform, I think it's really, it worked out really well. The client had a very focused budget, and so we were able to deliver on that. And I think this solution is both really, it's one of the best in the world in terms of the learner experience. Like if you've ever taken, no one's taken it, but if you ever use Blackboard, it's a terrible experience if you're a student. Like students hate it. Moodle's not much better. Canvas is okay. But when you compare that to like Open edX, it's like night and day. And so students have taken these MOOC classes and they're kind of used to it and they're used to their iPhone, and then they go on Blackboard and they're like, really? I'm paying $50,000 a year for this? And so this experience actually delivers that level. The total cost to the university, it includes a bunch of internal resources and as well as third parties like us. So it's on the order of $1.5 to $2 million, which if you compare that to an OPM vendor, it's normally 4 or 5 times that for 1 degree program.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to ask a question. What made you finally decide on edX between that and Sakai? And follow up on that is, what aspect of edX stood in your way the most when you're trying to change it into a platform that you can offer an online degree program on?
I think the learner experience was the main differentiator between Sakai and OpenEdX. Sakai is kind of what you'd expect. It's really a document management system. So, faculty can put things in there. It's got an awesome grade book, but the student experience is not great. And so, combining OpenEdX with the third-party services in an integrated fashion was a better student experience, and that was the key differentiator for it. In terms of what made it the hardest, by far the gradebook. The gradebook, OpenEdX was designed, it's really, the thing it is best at, by far, hands down, better than anything else in the world, is running edX.org. And so edX.org doesn't, really care about grading. And so that's the thing that we had to make the most changes to. Great. Well, thank you very much.